When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject, he sharpened. User, Hikarun77. Project, May 11th, 1998.
My girlfriends all told me it'd change after we got married. They all do. It stopped being sweet, drift into a rut, maybe grow a beer belly, and develop an intimate relationship with a recliner. You'd forget anniversaries, start calling me babe in that distracted autopilot way men do when they've already checked out. They said it like it was gravity. Can't stop it, it just is. Marriage equals decline. I nodded along at brunch, swirling my mimosa, pretending I believed that was the worst-case scenario. I didn't believe it'd change, but holy shit, when he did, Daniel didn't decline. He sharpened. If anything, the wedding flipped some internal switch from courtship to ownership. Not in the macho chest-thumping way. He wasn't controlling about where I went or who I saw. It was subtler than that. He became attentive in a way that felt less romantic and more forensic. He noticed everything. The exact cadence of my breathing when I fell asleep, the way my left eyebrow twitched when I lied about being fine, the fact that I hum under my breath when I'm anxious but don't realize I'm doing it. At first, it felt flattering in some creepy fucking way. Finally, a man who pays attention, but then it started to feel like I was being measured for something I hadn't agreed to. The house changed after I moved in, though I couldn't have told you how at first. Same furniture, same paint colors, same little chip in the hallway baseboard, but the vibe was just off. I would wake around 3 or 4 in the morning with the sensation that the room had shrunk an inch in every direction. The walls were closing in, not enough to see, just enough to feel, and Daniel would be awake too. Not tossing or turning, just lying there on his back, eyes open, watching the ceiling like it was broadcasting something only he could see. When I'd shift or stir, his gaze would slide toward me slowly, deliberately, and he'd smile. Not wide and not theatrical, just enough to let me know he'd been aware the entire time. I asked him once why he was up. He said he liked the quiet hour before dawn because the dark is thinner then. That's the kind of sentence that should come with a follow-up question, but something about the way he said it made it feel like a statement you weren't meant to challenge. So I rolled over and told myself this is what intimacy looked like. Two people acclimating to each other's rhythms. The dog was less diplomatic about it. My sister's golden retriever has loved every man I've ever brought into my life, including the ones who deserve to be chased off with a rake. When she dropped him off for the weekend so she could work a double at the hospital, he trotted into the living room like he owned the place, tail wagging. Then Daniel walked in, and that dog froze mid-step like he'd hit a wall of invisible glass. No barking, no growling, just low, guttural whine and a full body tremor that made my stomach tighten in a way I didn't want to examine. Daniel crouched down and extended a hand, calm as ever. The dog backed away slowly, eyes wide, before pissing right there on the hardwood and bolting for the hallway. It was terrifying. We laughed it off because that's what people do when confronted with something inconvenient and inexplicable. New environment, I said. He's sensitive. Daniel smiled and said animals are perceptive about shifts. He didn't elaborate and I didn't push because I didn't want to be the woman who starts inventing demons 3 months into a marriage. But things kept stacking up. Daniel stopped eating dinner in any meaningful way. He'd sit across from me with a plate in front of him, fork poised, nodding along to whatever I was saying about work or my sister or the price of groceries, but the food never really moved. When I'd pointed out, he'd say he wasn't hungry lately, then he required less. It sounded like some wellness cleanse at first, some minimalist diet experiment, except he didn't lose weight. He didn't look tired. If anything, he looked brighter, sharper around the edges. There were moments when he seemed to know what I was thinking before I'd even formed the words. I'd rehearse a complaint about my boss in my head on the drive home, and Daniel would greet me at the door with reassurance I hadn't asked for. I'd worry silently about money or about weather would move too fast, and he'd address it indirectly, soothing me with a calmness that felt less supportive and more strategic. At first, I told myself this was what emotional attunement looked like. Isn't that what we're all begging for? A partner who just gets it? But there's a difference between being understood and being accessed. The moment that shifted everything wasn't dramatic. No spinning heads, no sulfur clouds. I was chopping vegetables in the kitchen and sliced my finger open because I was distracted, replaying a conversation in my mind. It wasn't a bad cut, just enough to beat up red along the edge of my knuckle. Before I even processed the sting, Daniel was at my side, not walking, arriving. He took my hand gently, almost reverently, and held it up between us. He didn't panic, didn't reach for a towel, he just inhaled, deeply. The change in his face was subtle but unmistakable. His pupils widened until the brown of his eyes nearly disappeared, and something like relief flickered across his features. Not concern, not worry, relief. I jerked my hand back and wrapped it in a paper towel, suddenly hyper-aware of the space between us. He recovered quickly, offering a soft apology and some comment about me needing to be more careful. The whole exchange lasted maybe 10 seconds, but the room felt different afterward, like something had been confirmed. After that, I started paying attention in a way I hadn't before. The way the house went unnaturally quiet when he stepped into a room. The way I felt more tired around him, not physically drained, but dulled, like my edges were being sanded down. The way he seemed most content when I deferred to him, when I let him decide what movie to watch, what route to take, when to go to bed. The more I surrendered small choices, the more relaxed he appeared. The more decisive I became, the tighter his smile grew. It finally came to a head one night over candlelight, because Daniel prefers low light in the evenings. He says harsh light is distracting. We were sitting across from each other, the room flickering in warm shadows, when he reached for my hands and held them a little too firmly. He told me I was resisting, not in an accusatory tone, but in an evaluative one, like a doctor noting a symptom. Resisting what? I asked, trying to keep the sarcasm in my voice because sarcasm is armor and I've always worn it well. But he spoke about integration and sharing space in a way that felt less like marriage and more like merger. The words weren't overly sinister, but they were wrong around the edges. He reminded me gently that I had invited him in, that vows are doors, that consent isn't always as specific as we think it is. And in that moment, something inside me snapped into clarity. Not fear, recognition. I had been lonely when I met him, eager for stability. I had carved out space inside myself for something solid and dependable, something that would anchor me, and something had answered, something that fit the outline of a good man just well enough to pass. It was then, in the shadows of those flickering candles, that for a split second, I saw the truth. Not horns or fire or anything theatrical, just a misalignment. Like Daniel's face was a fraction too tight across the bones, like his smile extended a millimeter further than it should. His eyes didn't look black or monstrous, they looked deep, bottomless in a way no human gaze ever should. A chill ran up my spine because I knew Daniel was no man at all. Daniel was something I had never encountered before, something ancient, something I can't begin to describe, but every shred of my being knew that I had made a mistake when I married him, and that if I didn't get the fuck out now, God knows what will happen.
Subject, The Shadow Buffet. User, EFF Punk Bro. Posted June 25th, 1993.
This isn't my story. It happened to my brother Cody, but he won't tell it himself. Cody's a punk now and thinks computers are going to enslave us or something. Being punk has changed a lot about Cody. Last year, he shaved his head, left Ossining, and moved into the city. He was homeless for a while, but then ended up meeting his friend Fish. Fish taught Cody a lot about how to live off the grid in New York and got him a room and a squat. He lives there most of the time now, but sometimes he'll come back to Ossining to see me. Cody's older than me by 10 years, but he would still hang out with me when I was little. We'd go to the park and watch for shooting stars or ride BMX in the woods. One of our favorite things to do was talk about ghosts, if they were real and whether or not we'd ever want to see one. Cody used to tell me that he'd leave his body when he was asleep and fly around the neighborhood. He said he always came to see me before going exploring, and I knew he wasn't lying because I tested him once. I got a chair from the kitchen and stood on it to write something on the very top of the bookcase in my room. The next morning at breakfast, he told me what I'd written. And he wasn't home when I'd done it, so there's no way he'd know unless he was somehow looking down on it from above, the way he said. Cody used to tell me that the times it left his body were the most free he'd ever felt and wished he could show me. He even tried to teach me how, but I just couldn't. Then he left, and the worst thing about it, aside from him never showering or changing his clothes, which is grody, but it's that when he comes back, he doesn't want to talk about ghosts anymore because he says he's an atheist. I told him I thought atheist means you don't believe in God, which is fine because I don't want to talk about God. I want to talk about ghosts, but he says Fish told him atheism means no ghosts either. The world is what you can see and touch. Anyway, on his visit here last week, Cody was different. He got to the house in the afternoon when he knew Mom and Dad would be at work, which was normal, and he stunk like usual, but he looked sad. I asked him what he'd been up to, and he didn't respond for a while. Then, out of nowhere, he asked if I had a couple of bucks so we could go get Whoppers. BK runs was another thing we used to do before he met Fish, who felt like punks shouldn't eat fast food because it was corporate and bad for the environment or something. And if Cody wanted to go against Fish, I thought something really must be wrong. When we got to Burger King, Cody's old high school girlfriend Mel was working, so he let me go in and get the food while he sat outside. He'd broken up with her before moving into the city, and she took it pretty hard. Still, she was always nice to me and sometimes even asked how Cody was doing. That day, when I went up to order and she saw him waiting outside, she added some French fries and Cine Minis for me. I think she was worried about how rough Cody looked, because she made me promise I'd get him to eat everything. She didn't have to worry. When I got back outside to the table, Cody practically ripped into the paper bag like an animal. I'd never seen him so hungry, even before he left home, and I stood there watching while he ate everything, even my burger. I wasn't even mad about it. Weird as it was, watching him eat the greasy fast food like it was going out of style was kind of comforting too. It was less that too cool for school guy the city had turned him into, and more my big brother. Then, after it was all gone, Cody seemed to come out of his feeding frenzy and realized he'd eaten my food too. He apologized, and I told him it wasn't a big deal, but he wouldn't stop. He just kept telling me how sorry he was, how he'd messed up. Then he started crying, and I totally froze. Cody hadn't cried in front of me since Grandma Houston had died, and sure as hell not since he'd gone to the city. I didn't know what to do or say. He started full-on sobbing, the zippers on his stupid jacket jingling as he shook. It took Mel bursting out of the restaurant, running to us full tilt and throwing her arms around Cody to snap me out of it. Cody held on to Mel like he was drowning, and she didn't let go until the tears stopped. She passed him some of the napkins from our takeout bag so he could clean himself up, and when he was decent again, she asked him what had happened. He looked at both of us for a few minutes, then told us this story. I'm typing it here as close as I can remember to what he said. Chris, Mel, you remember how I used to tell you I would go away while I was sleeping? That I could go places and see things? I can still do that. It stopped for a while after I met Fish, but only for a while. I tried talking to him about it, but he told me it was bullshit, that the afterlife and psychic powers were a bourgeoisie fairy tale told to poor people so they'd feel empowered and not demand their fair share of the pie. I wanted to be like him so bad, so I just stopped bringing it up. Thing is, it kept happening, and I started to see more. Something I never told you is that when I'm outside of my body, I'm not the only person out there. The only thing out there. Sometimes I see other people. Sometimes I see not people. Most of them are hard to describe visually. There's something about them that makes them hard to remember when I wake up. They don't take any interest in me or the other people out there. They just go about their little rounds and circuits. I wonder if they can even see us, but the other ones, the shadows, they can see us. The shadows come in different shapes and sizes. Some look like people, but I don't think they actually are. Some are much, much bigger. They feed off of us, our fear, our pain. Sometimes they'll cluster around a person and bring misery into their lives. It's like fattening a turkey up before Thanksgiving. Once that person hits bottom, one of the big ones comes, and it's not too long after that the person dies. I never told either of you about this because there aren't many of those things around Ossining, and I didn't want to scare you, but in the city, they're everywhere. Started seeing them around the squad, especially on the 4th floor where Fish and I were rooming, and every night there were more, a lot more. I didn't get it because they weren't hanging around anyone in particular, they were just sort of there. It never occurred to me that they seemed to be most concentrated around the electrical room, but I understand now. Fish taught me that if we wanted electricity without paying for fuses, we could just hammer bits of copper pipes flat and then insert them into the fuse box. Lights come on and you don't have to pay anyone anything. Of course, sometimes one or two would melt, but we'd just rip them out and put in new ones. I swear I didn't know how dangerous it was. You have to believe me. Fish said it was fine, so I just did it. On Tuesday night, I went out to see Osrotten at ABC No Rio. It's a DIY spot on the Lower East Side. I wanted Fish to come, but he was being a dick because he had some kind of beef with the band. I don't know what. He's just like that sometimes. I was pissed at him, so I stayed out after the show and hung with Chevy and some of the other guys from No Rio. They're chill and they had some booze, so I ended up getting hammered and passing out on the floor. Chevy woke me up just after sunrise, and he told me mine and Fish's squat was on fire. A bunch of us piled into someone's car and went over to help put it out, but the fire department had the whole block cordoned off. All you could see in every window was flames. The only person I saw from the building was my friend Amy, who lived on the same floor as me. She was standing on the corner, wrapped up in a blanket, watching it all burn. She was in shock, I think, but I managed to get out of her that it had all started in the electrical room. The fuse box, of course. And there was so much junk everywhere that the fire spread fast, like it was gorging itself on our stuff, on us. She only got out because she was sober enough to know when to run. She didn't know who else had made it or if anyone had. Cody stopped talking for a while. Mel and I looked at each other and she rubbed his back. Eventually, he started again. The building is a goner. I don't even know if Fish is alive. I spent all yesterday looking, but he wasn't in any of the usual spots. I think those things knew what was coming. The shadows, they were getting ready for a buffet.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.